Okay, let's dive in. Dive in with a nice cup of tea. Nice, and I think I'll get mine soon too. And hopefully, all enjoying your day. It's being a good start. Deepika sounds quite pleased. And yeah, I guess we're really talking here on this part, the first few days on the preconception and how to prepare our body, mind, and our life really for conception or for welcoming a new life, baby, and then this whole amazing aspect that it brings in our life. So it's nice to be, a bit prepared for it. And that's, I think, mainly my talk's going to be around next few days. A couple of talks to sort of talk about the preconception, how important it is. All those cleansing, all those purificatory practices. Now, in Hatha Yoga itself, really, when we think or talk about Hatha Yoga practices, when we talk about health, well-being, or the peace of mind, it purely talks about, in a very beginning, he said, before you really can begin your journey, the first step is to begin with cleanup. Now, great, again, when we talk about cleanup in Hatha Yoga, in any sort of energetic traditions, in Vedic and yogic texts, they do actually talk about almost everything that we should look after. So, if you're thinking in yoga, they must be talking about how to clean my soul so I can have a direct connection with the divine. No, the yogis also talk about, you must clean your teeth, you must have a clean body, having a bath or shower, you must clean your clothes, you must brush your hair, you must clean the floor where you live. So it really talks about, all these aspects that brings health, happiness, and then the positive energy that can radiate or that can blossom in that space. I'm sure we all know that if the place is full of clutter, full of rubbish and mess, and you walk into that place, it's not really going to make you feel like, wow, so nice to be here. Or the energy, when the space is cluttered, we can feel that heaviness that stagnates into that energy when you walk into that space. So here in an idea, the concept of preconception, we're really talking about conception and bringing a new life, having a complete new start. And you can't really have a new start before cleanup even in a theoretical way, can we? It's like, preparing our body, preparing our mind, preparing our attitude, preparing our thought process, our emotional process, before we even think, okay, let's have a baby. It's like, one or two of you, the way you expressed, it was so true. You got to be so, like, have the clarity and understanding. It's not for me. Because it's a whole new world we moving into. And this is, one of the reasons you will see so many people suffer with the depression or so many issues during pregnancy and after pregnancy. And some of them, I would say, it's just down to not having even the simplest of the clear vision. Why am I doing it? Because there is what we call the fantasy world, isn't it? When you go and see somebody else's child and you play with them, it's great fun. Or when you see someone else being pregnant and, if you can just have a little bit of touch of the belly and you feel the baby, it just feels great. So that experience is one, but when actually it comes to us directly, it's completely different. This is like seeing the trailer of a whole movie. And sometimes the trailers are so great, but when you actually get into the cinema, in 10 minutes you feel, why did I come in? So to me, when we talk about this whole cleansing for preparation, it's not only just the physical, spatial, or relationship cleansing, it's also refining some of the thoughts, some of the ideas we have. And it's one of the great things, like in my experience, which I have seen in like the many Indian women, my own mom, then my sisters, and my sister-in-laws, my brother's wives, and so many women, when they have that community living, what we call the joint families, because you had so much experience already, so you kind of know beforehand if I should do it or not. And because the way we living in modern time, or we get to see someone with the kids for 10 minutes, 5 minutes, or maybe a couple of hours, and then we out of it. So to me, the idea behind this really the first aspect we all want to discuss or talk is not just the purification practice on physical, mental, emotional level, it's also purification in our vision and the idea we have in our head. It's like knowing the reality that what we're facing. As someone always tells me, there is lots of sleepless nights for years and years, and I think she got 2 kids, and one is 11 and another one is 13, and she said still she hasn't got a full night through where she says, oh, I slept so well. Anyway, so coming back, first thing we need to really talk about this whole purity, this cleansing or refinement. I guess to begin with our physical body itself. And it does become a little bit more important in sort of lifestyle we all live these days. Even though, yes, you guys, honestly, you are very lucky here, because I know quite a lot of you already vegetarian, vegan, and your lifestyle is so much better. But if you meet with people who are not living a little bit into the yogic lifestyle or this sort of approach, if you think about what sort of food they eat, what sort of relations they're having, well, all that is toxicating your body, toxicating your mind. And if your body and mind is toxic, I can tell you also going to have toxic thoughts or toxic feelings and toxic emotions. Now, in an ideal world, when I look at some of the tantric and some of the hatha yoga practices, they do really talk about doing some of the cleansing practices. Almost some of them say like you practice them for 9 months, and that 9 months you practice or you live with your partner, your husband or your wife, as if you are purely brahmachari. And then you plan yourself to have the sex for actually conceiving a baby, which is, I guess, for modern life maybe it would be a bit too intense to tell somebody like, look, I'm going to give you a practice for 9 months, do this and go through all these cleansing practices, and in that 9 months you're not going to even touch each other. That might be a bit too much. So let's not go into that aspect, but some of the yogic practice, like the Loma Viloma series, I would say, if someone really managed to come to you before conception and say, okay, what shall I do? So if not long enough, ideally, if I can get both the partners to do it together, that's obviously your ideal vision. But I don't know, I feel sorry too for most women. I do find most men tend to just want to sneak out. They don't really want, they do want child, they want to help someone to get pregnant. But if you talk about, having some sort of purity into the energy, I don't want to say everyone, but most seems to be just not even interested in listening, and they will say, what do you think, what's wrong with me? And in that way, then it's everything sort of gets gradually put down on women, like, oh, if anything wrong with the baby, anything wrong in conception, anything wrong, it's all seems to be the one-way fault, which is actually not true. It's not true. So in purification, when we're talking about preparation, then we're talking about ideally both the partners should work together. But then obviously if man is not interested, then because the woman has to, in a real sense, that's just like the physiological, the way it is, has to go through the pregnancy from very beginning, from the conception all the way to the birthing process. So that means that when we talk about the strength, the purity and ability to go through the whole process, then women definitely need a little bit more preparation. If the man can, work on clearing his lifestyle, clearing his food and diet, then yes, that does create a purer energy around the house, and plus Even the seed we talk about, the semen, it's a yogic idea, says it does get better at a very genetic level. So really in that purity practice, when we're talking about before conception, you're really looking at purifying our systems at a genetic or even at an epigenetic level on those samskaras or those old ancient memories, the life habits, or the sort of things we carry. And it's something I don't know how many of you have seen, but like I have seen actually a child. I know two kids in my life. They actually never met with their father. And they're very very close to me. The both men were very close, and then the woman, their kids, they're still very close to me. And every time I see them, especially now because there is so much distance between us, so I get to see them once in a year. The way they both behave, some of the habits, honestly, it's almost like if I'm seeing my friend again. Things like the way they will eat food, sometimes a little comment they will say, a word they will say, or a sentence, a phrase they put out, and you think, where does that come from? So some of these old memories, the samskaras at epigenetic, genetic level, we actually do transfer them through our genes, through the semen and then the egg. And this is where really the yoga brings, or in yoga we talk about the purity or the cleansing practices. If we can work through them, it says we can bring our own genetic and epigenetic energy to that level where the baby will be conceived, a child will be conceived, but for their own karma, for their own reasons. They will be free from your genetic regions, your genetic stories that will have influence on the child. Hopefully they're making some sense. So it doesn't guarantee, please don't take, doesn't guarantee that the child is going to be absolutely healthy or not healthy, what sort of intelligence or health or body or mind they will come up with. We said child will be free from your hereditary or your genetic problems. Does that make some sense? Hopefully it does. And if not, please do raise your hand, and then I can sort of try to find another way to explain it, if I do. So it really talks about using the cleansing practices to take ourselves to that level. And in that way, then we start to talking about, really, to me, the first part we begin with is the physical practice, Hatha Yoga practice itself, which I guess Deepika has taken you all through the Loma Viloma series, and then we're doing the Pranava Pranayama, the Pranava Sadhana, which is again a great practice actually to not just the balancing the energy of your pranic and apanic in upper and lower bodies, but also to release some of the traumas being held into your hips and your pelvic area, then your shoulder area, your neck area. So it does bring the energy into much more healthier clarity or balance, which hopefully will release also some of the old memories and traumas we're carrying genetically. When I say the old memories and traumas, I don't just mean what you have been through this life. They can also be, you might be carrying them from many lifetimes before too.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
The practice that we did earlier, the physical practice, could that also be done by a man? Or
Ideally.
Specifically for a female?
No, ideally, like to me, if your partner is really interested in having a healthy conception, ideally we want both of them to practice together.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that like how many cases, as I was just sort of like being a man myself and accepting that most men tend to, like, if you talk about, okay, let's do something before we get conceived, men just like, let's go to bed.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? For them, there is nothing less and nothing more. I'm sorry, it sounds very rude, but it seems to be a reality for most men. That's how they think. Like, so if we can convince them, like I personally like, and this is to me, the way Deepika shares her experience, and in one way, we don't really know how we would have gone if we would not have done yoga beforehand, because we did not really have that choice. It was too late. We practiced enough, but I do see, when I look at so many other people around me that been through the process without that preparation, then there is definitely a difference. And also, like in our children, we had so much sadhana with Sid and then so much sadhana with Dev, and I think the Krishna was a little bit busy, and we can see his energy is a bit more, I don't like, all over the place. He's so much more active in his own way, and sometimes I wonder, maybe because we both were so, I guess, very busy and tired and sort of like quite sort of, I don't know, all over the place really in that time. And that we can see the influence of our own lifestyle or what we were going through at that time influence on the child. And he kind of he got that skin problem, and sometimes I wonder that can also be something to do with the distress that we were going through because of our busyness and so many like projects we taken on, which maybe we could have dropped everything off for a bit, but sometimes you get into it. So ideally, yes, I would say if we both can do, but if not, then nothing is better. Something is better than nothing. And I guess then women definitely, to me, really need to do it, because you kind of also thinking through the purification, cleansing practices, preparing the womb, preparing all the muscles, preparing all the organs to actually be able to receive or accept a healthy pregnancy. So in that way, the purification process, when you talk about, it's not just cleansing, you also actually got to build the muscles, you got to build your whole hip, your pelvic area, then you got to also build a bit of your shoulders, your chest, your heart, to go through that healthy process. So yes, movement becomes a bit more, or I would say 90% important really, more than men. But if they both can go through, it's definitely, it's much more supportive. And in ideal world, I would say, if I have a choice, don't get pregnant with someone who is not really interested in the whole journey itself. But it's easy said, saying is one thing, but actually making it practical is a whole different world. But yeah, so coming back to now, we're talking about this purificatory practices. So we got the physical practice, Hatha Yoga practice to begin, because that helps you to physically, mentally and emotionally become stronger. Then we also have some more advanced cleansing practices, like ideally again if you can go through the whole Sanka Prakshalana itself. So that is a whole again intense practice where you're drinking salt water, and there is a couple of yogic movements that helps to flush the water through, and at the end of the process the clean water comes from the other end. Up to that point you just give it a really good wash. So think inside out path, okay, just doing a cleanse through your whole intestinal system. Well, the nearest experience, some of you might have done it. If not, then if you ever had like something like colonic irrigation, so that's sort of like a really nearest experience, because they do go through almost like most through the intestines to get out everything it's there. So the idea behind that is just getting rid of all the toxic food. And when we talk about the toxic food, some of the old food being held around, hanging around, stuck there, it can be also carrying some of the old memories or old traumas and stuff that you have been through the life. And I guess again, if I take a really simple example, when you had something happening in your life where there is a little bit of sudden shock about something, or someone says something that was, I guess, so not nice, you get a bit of clamp in your belly. And how many times we experience that? Sometimes you just get like if someone has given you a big punch somewhere in the belly. So those little trauma, those little stress that creates that clamp, sometimes your intestines can actually suck the water out of it to try to deal with that stress, and in that way the food can get stuck in that area. Now, I guess Swamiji, he's done lots of research, and I think Deepika was telling, she might come back to tell us that someone in the ashram was telling that something came out, and they said that they had never eaten meat for like 15-16 years or something. Can't remember exactly what. Well, there was someone telling us.
There was a person that had very bad constipation for most of her life, and then she went through the process, and she didn't have constipation after that.
Yeah, maybe we'll come to. I think there was someone not in our course. Amma tells like this girl, she had some like serious issues from very early phase, and during the Sanka Prakshalana she said And they do tell you actually to every time you go to run to toilet in between the process, you look at what's coming through. And she says there was like a little lump of sort of like a sausage or meat that was stuck, and she said she hasn't eaten meat for like 16 or 17 years. So some of the food actually, yeah, it sounds very horrible, Hazel, sorry. It can actually, when you had that clamp of something, it actually can cleanse into your intestines. Some tissues, they get so tensed, or they basically almost like a dry log in there, and it can just stuck there all the time. So when we talk about that purification, it says you're not only purifying your body, but also then through that process you're refining or purifying some of the old memories or the stress or that traumatic stuff that you might be holding on to into your system.
Can I ask a question about that? Would you have to consult your doctor before doing that? Purely because I've got digestive issues. It's something that I've thought about, but then I'm like, would it make it worse? Or like, do you know what I mean?
I personally would have thought the only people I say they need to consult doctor really if you got like any heart problem, especially things like like sort of heart strokes and things, because you're taking so much salt through, that will affect. Otherwise, no digestive problems unless you got like ulcers or something that can like erupt like a blood or like a wound or something. Then yes, you need to. Otherwise, no. Like we never had problem with that sort of process. But if you think there is something like some sort of injury or something, then yes, we will need to, because the process is vigorous and you got so much churning going through the system, and it can actually cause more disruption. But if it's only a digestive issue, then most digestive problems get cured through that system. So it is one of the therapy in yoga therapy and naturopathy they do. Anyway, so that process helps you to not only release the waste that being held there, but also release some of the old memories being held or being trapped into your intestinal, your digestive system. Once you've done that, then you come to the second level after physical cleanse, and I'm not going to go into all of them. Like some of them, like definitely the Jalneti and Suttarneti. It's a great practice, and I personally do believe like really before pregnancy, and then obviously in the first trimester you don't really want to do anything that can disturb your system. But after that, again, doing the Jalneti or Suttarneti once in few weeks or once in a month can again help you to have your nostrils so clear that as you're going to lose the space to breathe, that will accommodate you to be able to breathe more. Your windpipe, the whole system will be much more clearer, so that can actually help you to have a little bit more relaxed time during the last 2 phases of pregnancy, if we can have very clear nostrils. Plus we all know that struggling with sinus, any sort of migraines, headaches, all that to me the Jalneti and Suttarneti are the very beautiful curative and preventive practice, which helps to boost your immunity, boost your health. If you can breathe enough, I'm sure we got 2 midwives here, they can share, if the mom can breathe deep enough, then the baby is going to receive enough oxygen they need. So through that, the nasal cleansing, you can even see in a practical level, it will really help to have a much more healthier breathing system.
Is that using saline as well?
Yes.
To clean the nostrils?
Yeah, so we use a bit of saline salt water, not salty but saline water with little bit of warmth. And if you're all interested, I'm sure Deepika or be happy to demonstrate them. Even though you will need a bit more training than just seeing them to be able to teach it to somebody. But yeah, I think the people who've done courses with us, they know what I'm talking about. How many of you have actually done Jalneti? I guess quite a few have done it. So we'll demonstrate that when it's a nice day. Deepika is going to show you all so you can see. So you just use the warm saline water, pour it to one nostril and it comes out from other. Yeah, it sounds a bit more than actually when you do it, it's great. And if you want to hear some experiences, don't believe me, just talk to some of these. Yes, when we're talking about it and we're looking at someone else doing it, you just think like, why would I do it? But once you have done it and once you like come out of it, then you realize actually I'm so glad. Because you just feel your head is different. You can breathe 3 times more through the same nostrils. And we all know that during pregnancy our body immunity tend to slightly go down, so we tend to catch anything and everything that is around at that time. So if you can have your nostrils quite strong, that's also quite preventive for like many sort of like infections and viruses and anything to do with sinus and breathing. So it also strengthens your body immunity system too. Well, then we come to sort of little bit looking into cleansing or purification of our lifestyle. Now in lifestyle, I guess you can talk about our drinking habits, our smoking, drugs. If you do take any, if you don't, that's good. You don't have to start them. You don't have to like, oh, I need to clean myself up. So what? So straight after pregnancy course, they said before your pregnancy, if you're thinking to have a child, you must clean up. Well, what do I clean up? I never taken any drugs. So let's start first. Now, if you're not doing it, that's great. Otherwise, yes, to me again, if you're thinking for conception, if anyone asks me advice, I would say really that's the next thing you want to look into, purifying or changing some of the lifestyle choices that we might be enjoying. And again, we're very lucky we got 2 of them here that you can ask the questions about how unhealthy it is to really have any influence of like drinking, drugs and smoking during pregnancy and after having children too. Especially,
Preconception.
It's better to prepare beforehand, yes. So the cleansing and the smoking.
That's for both partners.
Especially if it's something to I think for me when I was talking about purification, ideally really the both partners should be together, but like during the pregnancy and afterwards, ideally you want both of them to living a good life. If not both, I would say if your partner smokes, just don't let them come anywhere near, because at least other habits maybe at least will stay in their part of life, but that's definitely, I think to me, like cleanly must be avoided. You should not really spend much time, even if they say like, oh, I'll just go out and smoke outside the house. Well, we know that 20 to 30% of that toxicity of smoking will still come in the house, unless you get them to do lots of mukha vastrika for half an hour. If you can tell them like, if you can't stop smoking, smoke, but before you come in the house, get into the mountain pose and do a couple of hundred of mukha vastrika, and that will get rid of it. But I doubt it. So I would definitely say I think during the pregnancy, like any environment where there's like any sort of toxicity, or smoking is like, it's not only what you smoke, it is the passive smoking is, I guess, the same harmful as if you're smoking it yourself. It doesn't matter how you take it, it's going in, and will definitely have, especially in my sort of understanding, especially the nervous system gets more effect, and in the young babies, during the second, third trimester, where the brain and all the nervous system development is going on, I would say you don't really want that around. Just tell them, we'll just do all the house clean and clean the dishes and make the food, and I will eat my own food when you're not there, if you can't stop smoking. That's definitely, to me, if you're really thinking of having that child that growing in without any influence of all that nicotine and all that toxicity of smoking. Other ones, as I said, I guess at least they don't have the direct influence on the mother's body. But then when we talk about next level of cleansing, where we talk about our behavior, our thought process, our feelings, or emotions, I guess if we're living around toxic people, then they have their own sort of environment, and it does bring I don't know, like now and then it does bring negativity, especially if the one partner is not really drinking and smoking and taking drugs, and the other one is doing, I would say it will become quite heavy. But let's not go there again. That's something maybe not as easy as we think, really, especially the culture and lifestyle we live. But as a mother, definitely should really, if possible, keep away from all three of them. So that's our first lifestyle change. And the second lifestyle is, understanding what activities and things I should participate and what things I should avoid. Now, great thing in Indian woman, in sort of my grandmom's time, when I talk to my grandmom, she's like, you come in a house to live with your husband, and everything is so different and new, and all these challenges, working hard, and all that goes on. And he said, the only one time your life transforms into like you are like a queen or like a princess. Now I'm talking normal Indian families. There are also extremes are everywhere. You just get slaved, doesn't matter what you go through. They are either here or back in India. Everywhere there are good people, there are bad people. So in real authentic families, when the parents, the sister, brother, they realize you're pregnant, most things, hard work will be taken out of your plate. And my grandmom said, at times she said, like sometimes I used to laugh, like, why did you have 6, 7 kids? And she was like, oh, that was luxury. Actually, getting pregnant was one of the most luxurious time when she was young as a daughter-in-law in that family. He said, even my mother-in-law, she would always pointing her fingers what to do and what not to do. The minute you conceived and tell her, I'm having another grandson or granddaughter for you, your life changes in that moment. So I guess any heavy work, any exertion work, and especially on the first trimester, isn't it? You should really avoid anything that causes any exertion on your system, and the last trimester. I guess the middle one kind of, I think most people say it's like luxury of life. So then the next thing we're talking about, from very beginning, starting to understand that the lifestyle choices I should make. So I'm not going to suffer things I miss. So as we earlier talked, the choices you got to start changing beforehand, really, before you even get conceived, because then the depression or some of the suffering that people I have heard from would not be part of your pregnancy. Because you already made the choice, okay, I'm happy not to go down pub because people smoke there. I'm very happy to not go out and stay, go and do clubbing and all this dancing and music, because I know soon I'm getting pregnant and I would not have maybe energy or strength, or I would not feel doing them anymore. So to me, when I talk about that or think about the lifestyle cleansing or changes, you start to kind of look into some of those habits maybe we enjoyed for long enough, but then understanding, okay, if I'm going through this process, it's time to not do them for a bit. I'm sure they will come back again at some point when the kids leave home, when like we're in, I don't know, mid-50s. Like when Deepika are laughing, hopefully we'll be back into normal life at some point. But it is a choice, and I think if we can make some of the choices way before, then your journey will become much more easier or smoother. So a little bit of change, a little bit of, I guess, cleansing of our lifestyle and the choices that we want to live. And sometimes I wonder, even like a bit of changes or clarity of our dreams or ambitions or goals we have. So if you have like a dream or ambition of, I would love to travel the world, I would say do it beforehand. Then, if you ask me, Deepika or Anita, and I think quite a few of you others said too, if you get out to have a holiday of a week, it's great. And when you come back from holiday, first thing, especially when me and Deepika land back home, she's like, I think I need a holiday now. You're actually more tired than when you leave. So even sometimes I do question myself, like we should also have a little bit of thinking on, like a bit of clarity or change in our life goals or ambitions or the dreams, the vision we have. Well, that has to slow down a bit. That has to have some sort of grounding, some sort of foundation for that period where you would not be able to run as much as you can do now. And then the last and most important thing, and then I will stop here, let you all sort of come up with a few things. I guess the purity or clarity of our relationship itself. Who we spending our time, who we spending our energy, or the person we trying to get conceived with. Definitely, I do believe, especially for really the benefit for the woman, they should really always look into that the person who we involved with, is that person is really up for responsibility, is that person up for being with you for that process going to be helpful, or the minute you tell them, oh, just to let you know, I think I'm pregnant, and you don't see them ever again. It's just for someone like me, I do find it very strange, like how can you do that? But for most people, I've also known quite a few people, again very close to me around here, that the minute the man finds out, oh, you got pregnant, you just don't see them again. So that's also the part that we should consider actually before conception. Who am I being with? Is that person really interested on physical, mental, psychological, spiritual, and economic? Someone very close, like Deepika is one of the best friend. It's still we feel very sad. This like someone comes into life and then you got pregnant and there you go. There is no support whatsoever on physical, mental, or emotional level. And on top of all that, also it becomes quite abusive too. So some of these ideas, I would say, we need to really think and consider to change or transform on physical level, mental, emotional level, our psychic level, then our lifestyle and our relationship itself. I guess I will stop here just to give you some ideas and some thoughts to think. If anyone have anything you're thinking, you would like to share, any maybe questions, you feel asking, it's your time.
With my kids, I have to say, it's the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
So Sybil, the youngest, she's very calm
Mm-hmm.
because I was a lot calmer
Mm-hmm.
then, I think. And Noah is not calm, really at all.
Mm-hmm.
But he's just got a lot of energy. But prior to having him, I was so busy. We both were really, really busy. So from what you said, that perhaps has had an effect on
Mm.
other behaviours. But Sybil is so calm.
Mm.
Yeah.
Kind of thing that kind of reflecting on that might be important to have quite a balanced way of looking at it, because I could see this making some potential for thinking that the parents are responsible for issues that the children mightn't have had, and maybe there's
No, I thought I clearly mentioned that. So what we're really trying to do, we're trying to reduce the hereditary or our lifestyle influences, but still it does not make it. So the child will have his or her own karma, and he has to be there. And on top of that, we all know that really. To me, again, when I look at the Sankhya, the yogic perspective, the way the child chooses you as a parent or somebody as a parent is actually a two-way concept. So whatever we go through, the person to be like that, there is a reason for parents and a reason for child. There is a lesson for both of them. So none of them is actually to be blamed for whatever is there. There is a reason for it, and we all in that for learning a particular lesson. And to me, again, the yogic philosophy, yogic concept clearly say that whatever you're going through in life, it's all as a divine blessing. There's nothing there that you're being cursed or being punished or tortured. It's just our perspective that maybe sometimes we can't see the bigger picture of what we're going through. Which I do like that idea more than thinking, oh my God, I'm going through this. Is it some sort of punishment or what I've done terribly bad that I'm going through this? So the Sankhya says no. Your perspective should always, whatever I'm going through, there is a divine blessing. And to me, I always use the very simple example of if you're a fan of credit cards, end of the month you get the bill in your post. And when you open it, you don't really curse credit card company, do you? Why have I got this bill? So sometimes, when there's some life events we go through, we go to see them as a divine blessing of purifying, working through some of the old karma, some of the old debts that we have. And plus, on top of that, some of the skills we really learn when we're being pushed through some of that hardship. It's like, to me, really interesting. I was listening to midwives today talking about how the transformation that wants to think how can we do more holistic way of helping women through the pregnancy. But can you think, for once, if you would not have gone through that health system, because that's what brings you to that realization. So even though you think, oh wow, that was a very hard way to learn, but actually maybe there was only one way for someone to experience it, to understand it, and then either you can just become part of them and keep going through the same thing every day and get money paid every month, be happy with it, or you start to think different and say, what can I do different to genuinely help somebody? And to me, that's the yogic attitude, what I can learn from it. And when you can learn from it, it's a blessing. And if I can't learn from it, then I just suffer. So no, there's nothing to be, nothing to be punished or nothing to feel like being judged for things. And when we did things, as I always tell everyone too, when we made some choices 20 years ago, or we made 20 years ago choices which we thought right then. If you don't agree with them now, well, that's you now, not who were we 20 years, what I did 20 years ago. If I do that now, definitely my dad will laugh and get upset. But when I was doing that then, he was fine with it. But I don't think he will like me to seeing the same thing now, because he will be like, you are a grown-up person, you got your own kids. Any other questions, or otherwise I will leave you all in safe hands of Deepika again after your tea break.
You've got a bit longer. You've got a bit longer. You're not scheduled to finish yet. I'm just wondering if you want to talk a bit at all about diets.
Okay, so little bit on diet, I guess. Some of the subjects I did not really go much into, maybe as much I should have gone, because I thought I just put them in bullet points. I guess what we eat, what we drink, again, it's again a really great aspect of our life to look at, because what you eat, as in again another yogic and Ayurvedic phrase actually says, you become what you eat. You are what you eat and you become what you think. So the food, the diet you are selecting, you're choosing, that again have I guess influence on your physical health, your mental health, and your emotional health too. Now ideally, again, to me, when I think from the yogic and Vedic perspective, they do recommend for pregnancy having a pure sattvic diet, so that's pure vegetarian diet, no meat, and all that processed food should not be involved in pregnancy. But when I think about it from Western perspective, maybe we have to look at a little bit different on some of the ideas. Because I've also known quite a few people, they do find it very hard, especially during the pregnancy and during breastfeeding. If they have lived on meat all their life, they do tend to complain like, oh, my energy level is just going too far down. So I'm not sure again how much realistic it is, but at least I would definitely say like preconception part we can look at that to be vegetarian for a little while if possible, because it does help to like cleanse some of the old stuff. And in one of the Sankhya concept, and one of the teacher I lived with, he used to always say that the food you eat, it carries its own memory, it carries its own thoughts, and when you eat that thought, that memory will have influence on your thoughts, your feelings, and your emotions. So if you're eating an animal which is being locked into a cage, being killed, being processed through that hardship, you will also have some influence of that fear, that trauma, that anger, that resentment that the animal, that poor animal goes through. He also says actually the food you eat is how it's being cooked will also have the influence. So when you're eating food, if it's being looked down, it's being just like thrown away to you, he said that will also bring its own negative energy or the negative impact on you. So I guess on a dietary cleansing, the first thing really individually need to look at what is right for them, instead of us telling them, okay, you should be vegetarian or non-vegetarian. To me, especially the sort of culture we live in. And I personally do like being a little bit like kind to people instead of being harsh. You should only have kids if you can be vegetarian. Just don't know what people sort of lifestyle they have lived. You should give them choice. If possible, yes, being vegetarian can be great, but then that will need a whole new training for somebody going through that process, especially if you're not being vegetarian beforehand, or you got to teach them how to eat enough proteins, how to get enough nutrients, how to keep your stomach busy, because that's another thing. I've known quite a few people dramatically decided to become vegan overnight and then struggle with more digestive problems they had before they become vegetarian or vegan. I known someone actually, he came as a volunteer here and then he has to go back. He's talking about they have to do some sort of operation to clean up his intestines because he was getting some wounds. I thought for some reason, and I did explain to him, maybe it was because, so he grew up in a typical English family where all 3 meals there has to be some sort of meat on the plate, including early morning breakfast. And he just read something, some blogs, and nice boy. And as sometimes you read something so good, and he just felt like that was terrible. I must be vegan for my own conscience, to follow ahimsa, to follow non-harm, and he decided to turn that around overnight. But you got to think then, because his stomach was busy all these years, 16, 17 years, digesting 3 meats a day, so he was producing so much acid, and suddenly he stopped doing that. Now the advice he got from people, eat more avocado, eat this, eat that, which all was like quick to digest. And to me, when I think about it, that part gradually, because his stomach was still producing so much acid, then the acid has nothing to digest. So he started his problems with the ulcers, and then the ulcers got more and more into the small, and some even in larger intestine, because the stomach was got used to a habit, which what do I do with it? So then we got to think about how to replace them, how to provide enough nutrients like proteins, vitamins, all the fats that you need for even a simple living while you're not pregnant. While you're pregnant, then you need, I guess, twice of the energy or three times of energy. Is it twice or three times?
Well, we need the protein for
Yeah.
sure. I can't tell you if we need twice or three times as much. I think it's
I think we need 200 calories more.
More, yeah.
which isn't that much
Okay.
more, is it? We get taught that it's not actually a huge difference, but you need to eat the right type of foods, like Chris saying. So lots of proteins, and I can see how if your friend went from meat eating to vegan, it's a massive jump.
Yeah.
I'd be worried if pregnant women went straight to vegan from having that.
It would not be a good move.
No, and I've actually known women who were vegetarian to sometimes then go and eat meat. They need it. So it's difficult. They just need to have the right foods, not processed. Is a really good.
Yeah, so to me, again, diet-wise, that's why I normally think that if you can advise them to eat, like, more fresh food, fresh fruits, and some sprouts, I guess that's something, if we can include somehow, encourage people, it's a really great food to have in the diet during pregnancy, or even for your day-to-day
Full of
life.
iron, isn't it? Sprouts and
Yeah.
such.
So something like that, if you can do, like, take a couple of different seeds every day, grains every day, and then sprout them, and if you can bring something like that in diet, because the sprouts do have like a very strong amount of not just the proteins and vitamins, but they have it in a right sort of place where your body takes them much easy. And also they have all the oxidants and the things that your body needs to kind of speed up some of the metabolic and then the physiological functions to help or support. Otherwise, just like giving everyone really their own idea of choosing what is right to eat and what is not right to eat. So things, if someone say, oh, I think that food, I don't really agree with it. During pregnancy, really that food, before that, maybe now and then, like, oh, I think the curry, the spices, I don't really like them. But maybe now and then you just went out to had a bit with someone, that in that phase I would say those things purely should be excluded. So the experiment part, like fun part of food, if we can avoid that, that's kind of my idea really, should be avoided in that part. You should keep it really simple and straight. Things your body agrees, you feel happy, you feel light, you feel full of energy. That food is always going to be great.
Would you recommend getting like a intolerance, food intolerance test or anything? Because I feel like I've got something going on, but I don't know what it is, and I feel like it's going a bit rubbish. And we're trying to get to the bottom of it before I did go into the sort of pregnancy phase. So, is there anything you recommend for that? Is there a particular like tolerance test you can do?
Definitely, I think Deepika knows few. She might be able to recommend. But you've done one, haven't you, a couple of years back, if I remember it?
Well, I've got a half sister who's really into allergies and intolerance, and she sent off for me to have this York test. It's like a blood test,
Right.
and then they go through like 130 intolerances, and then you can keep paying more to get checked for more things. But it's basically just like a pinprick blood test. And then of course, like Krishna, our third, he had a dairy intolerance when he was born. So then we took him to the consultant, and he had the tests of his arm, that kind of.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, have you seen your GP? Because maybe there's something.
Yeah, I'm being referred, but I'm on a waiting list. Goodness knows how long that's going to be.
Yeah.
But I kind of want to be
no, but definitely, I think worth to get something done is definitely, I would say there's many places these days anyway. There should be.
There's one that's you know Samantha Lewis who trained with me in India. She's a nutritionist based incidentally, and she said
She did vegan, didn't she?
yeah. My daughter also did it. It's a place in Cambridge that you can send through her
I think I know
details,
that.
and then they do. I think it was something like 40 plus or something like that, and it comes back with a spectrum of the ones that your body is finding most difficult to assimilate down to the things that are okay. It's £111.
I'm sure it'd be worth it.
Yeah, worth it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that satsanga?
Yeah, the same one. Yeah.
Very knowledgeable person too. So I'll give it a look. Yeah.
No, there should be there is one place I think in Nabar, so there should be something almost everywhere really. So if you look for it, but that's a good idea. Yeah, no, it's worth it to get something properly looked at, and I've known quite a few people. There seems to be come up with some good suggestions, things that can be avoided to stay out of problem. But during pregnancy, like again, I personally would say, before conception, yes, we should ideally give people a little bit more healthier training on diet. And as a pregnancy teacher, people will be asking you, but you got to be quite clever how to say things.
I think diet's one of those subjects that people can be very passionate about, and it can be difficult. And I mean, I'm one of those people. This is funny. I'm just talking like this. I've been vegetarian for years and years, since doing the course in India and before that. But once I got pregnant, I was just like exhausted, and I then started eating just a bit of chicken like once a week, and it kind of felt like a bit of a saviour to me. It just kept me going, and the same with breastfeeding. So I do think maybe we have to consider different body constitutions as well, because you've also got Ayurveda, which is part of yoga, the different body types, and also where we live, because in India you get so much energy from the sun. It's always like warm and sunny like most of the time apart from monsoon, and it's just so easy to be vegetarian there, and it's just a kind of effortless. You just feel like you get energy somehow. But I found it a lot harder during my sort of winter pregnancies in Wales.
The energy's so low, isn't
It's
it?
the D.
Yeah.
It's vitamin D, isn't it? That you get from the sun, and as midwives, we actually have to give advice about, say, some ethnicities who work workers and don't get much sun, especially living in West Wales, we don't get much sun, but to actually take supplements or really or introduce vitamin D to their diets in a big way. So it sounds like if you're really, really tired and there could have been vitamin D deficiency.
Well, vegetarian as well, it's the iron, isn't it? It's really difficult to get sources of iron. Red meat is a really good source, and it's just making sure that you're not deficient then going into pregnancy.
I was taking a lot of iron, the Spartan stuff. I still take it actually now and again. I think this is such good stuff. But yeah, and I think just generally not being too hard on ourselves about it really, because obviously I wasn't very comfortable about it at first, but I was just like, well, this is, I didn't feel like I didn't already have a good balanced diet, but for some reason it was just
As a yoga teacher, your advice got to be just very smart and diplomatic. Really, just tell people, look, you got to eat healthy, you got to eat enough. I think one of our teacher, Annapurna, she did lots of cooking and great woman, vegan, good example of vegan actually. She says, when you eating or you're trying to pick a healthy diet on your plate, just make sure you got all the colors on your plate you can think of.
Eat a rainbow.
Eat a rainbow. And I think especially during pregnancy, it kind of become even more meaningful. A few leaves, few colors, flowers, or whatever you can think, few different seeds. So that brings you the proper balance of your diet. And to me, if I want to put it in one phrase, that's the simplest solution we can give to people. And I think I personally would not advise someone like, I think maybe being vegetarian is better or being vegan is better. Especially in that phase, because you don't really want to take any gamble on playing with energy levels. They got enough they're dealing with. Yeah, beforehand, yes, we can work, we can experiment on, try to go vegetarian, try to go vegan and see, how are your energy. And that does also help definitely the purification process we're talking about. If you can go vegetarian or vegan, it speeds up all the cleansing process. Okay, that should be enough. Now Deepika is smiling. Good.